Welcome to the UK Travel Planning Podcast. Your host is the founder of the UK Travel Planning website, Tracy Collins. In this podcast, Tracy shares destination guides, travel tips, and itinerary ideas, as well as interviews with a variety of guests who share their knowledge and experience of UK travel to help you plan your perfect UK vacation. Join us as we explore the UK from cosmopolitan cities to quaint villages, from historic castles to beautiful islands, and from the picturesque countryside to seaside towns.
Hello and welcome to the UK Travel Planner Podcast. This is episode 41. I'm over the moon today that we have special guest John Coupland from John England Tours, who's agreed again to come back onto the podcast. And as many of you will know, who are in our UK and London Travel Planning Facebook community, that John is our kind of expert driver tour guide for the southeast of England. And he comes on and you know, he'll give advice and help in the group when he can, which is absolutely amazing. And obviously, John has been on the podcast previously as well, including episode 6, where we talked about discovering historic southeast England with John England Tours. And episode 19, best day trips from London in particular. So if you want to hear more from John, it's good to go back and listen to those episodes, which we will link to in the show notes. But without further ado, let me welcome John Coupland from John England Tours. Hi, John.
Hello, Tracy. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be back again. Where have the months gone?
I know, isn't it crazy? It's absolutely incredible. And obviously, by the time, this episode will be coming out just a few days before I actually fly to the UK. So I just thought I'd mention that as well. Yeah, not too long till this one comes out, John. So obviously I've invited you on today to talk to us about your medieval day tours, which I'm particularly interested in. I do put my hands up as somebody who was a history teacher and has got a degree in history. This is an area of history that I'm not brilliantly knowledgeable about. It's an area that Doug's particularly interested in, so maybe he should be doing the podcast with you. So I thought it would be brilliant for you to talk about your medieval data, and we'll kind of chat all about what the tour's about, other destinations with a kind of medieval, it would be of interest to those who are interested in medieval history. And then we'll talk a little bit. I've got some quotes. I have to tell you, I've been very sneaky, John, and I've taken some fantastic quotes off your website. So I'm going to be throwing some of those quotes at you from some of your
keeping me in my toes.
I have to say some of your very, very, very happy clients and customers. And then obviously at the end of the podcast, we'll talk to people about how they can actually book a tour with you. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to let you take the floor, John, and tell us about your medieval day tour, please.
Yes, thanks, Tracy. So with the medieval England private tour that I do, I set that up to enable my guests to visit some historic places in southeast England, predominantly Kent and parts of Sussex, in southeast England. And these are historic places that, some are known and some maybe less well known. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So on the listing that you'll see, for those who care to have a look at the listing, there's item moats. And that's described by Dr. David Starkey, a leading historian in this country, as one of the most beautiful and interesting of English country houses. Now, that is about 700 years old. It's showing the vernacular. And so what I mean by that, it's enabling visitors to see how people used to live in medieval times, rather than a cathedral, for example, which, like a monumental building. So rather than a monumental building, it's more a home. It's a large home. And in fact, it's a bit of a mouthful. So it's Britain's only small, fully complete medieval house with a moat.
Right.
You have to think about that one. And so that's run by the National Trust, and it's so precious. They spent millions conserving it, about 15 or so years ago. And it's just glorious in the heart of what we call the Weald of Kent. I mean, locals here, as we call it, is the Weald. And that used to be a forest, which is obviously parts of it's deforested, due to the building of houses, ships, etc. over the centuries. So that's an incredible piece of history. and it has a 14th century medieval hall in it. So it's really got the wow factor.
And you, as you say, this was somewhere where people actually lived, like normal people lived in, rather than.
Yeah, I mean, you had to have a degree of wealth.
Right.
Yes, I mean, like nobles, knights over the years, even last century, an American bought it, for a while and helped conserve it as well, because of course these places over the years do start falling apart. And more recently, like I mentioned, National Trust look after it, and of course, they raised funds and conserved it. So it's in its prime. It's just incredible, really. And it's in a beautiful location. But of course, it's reachable. Obviously, I provide the transportation, from the suburbs, Bromley, which is only 20 minutes from London Victoria by train. So it saves a lot of hassle about being stuck in traffic, etc. And even if, let's say, my guests just have the day, what we usually do is to visit two places like Ighton Mote, and as per my listing, the other one is Penshurst Place. Yes. About 20 minutes drive from Ighton Mote, which I'll cover in a minute.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So this medieval, have you recently just launched the medieval day tour? Is that a recent?
Well, I mean, officially, I listed it about 2 years ago. But I was doing it anyway, and it's part of my tailor-made proposition, where it was evident to me that some of my guests just wanted something different, because it's a mixture. I have some guests maybe who have visited for the first time in England, or self-confessed Anglophiles, where they've been here many times. They've seen most of the major attractions, especially around London, the Tower of London, Hampton Court Palace, Windsor Castle, and they just want something different. Then there's a mix and match where I have guests where they've got a little bit more time, that of course they want to see the attractions, etc., but they want something different, which is not too far from London, that they can do, in a day, if that's all the time they've got.
And it's a really, I say, like, if you've got an interest in medieval history, and as you say, actually, rather than see, because there's plenty of cathedrals that you can visit in England.
Yeah.
But actually go, as you say, for Ighton Mote, which I've never been to, so I'm going to have to add that to my list, John. And you already know how much I've got to do when I visit the UK,
Yes.
So I have to add that in. So Ighton Mote, would you go there? Would that be the first place you'd visit in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, usually it is. So because how we time it, what I offer is, it's for most of the places, the guiding. But of course, being a local, the interaction with the people who work at these places, now that I feel is really important, the engagement. And, and I know my guests love that. So where I can, I'll introduce my guests, where practical, to some of the staff and volunteers who work at these historic places. Now, of course, somewhere like Ighton Mote, they don't have that sort of Hollywood pull, which means that, the notorious King Henry VIII, it's like Hampton Court Palace. Oh, right. Okay, that was his pleasure palace. Tell me more. And of course, it attracts a lot of visitors. That's great. But with somewhere like Ighton Mote, most of my guests wouldn't have even heard about it. And of course, it existed during the Tudor times, of course, the medieval times that we're talking about today predominantly. But there's a Catherine of Aragon connection there, a historic chapel in there. It's just quite an incredible place, and it doesn't feel like an attraction, because it is, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it is off the beaten path, literally, but not too far from London. It's pretty hidden, which is, of course, I provide the access for my guests as a local.
Yeah, and then so after visiting Ighton Mote, which I can't spell, but I know I did look on your website.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I looked at it and went, okay, that's how you pronounce it. So I will put that, because I'm sure that'll come up. I will actually put that in the show notes spelt correctly. I will double check that. So after Ighton Mote, then where would you generally take your guests?
Generally speaking, but there's no must-dos, but as per the listing, it's Penshurst Place. Now, Penshurst Place, again, historic. It's more palatial, so it offers something a little bit different. It's only about a 20-minute drive away.
It's a bit posher, is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, it is a bit posher. It's grand, okay, but there's a bit of an irony really in this because I mean it's got centuries worth of history, and it was actually the former residence of Edward Stafford, who's the third Duke of Buckingham, and he was the one who, I know I'm impinging on Tudor times inevitably here, but during the reign of King Henry VIII. He arguably had a stronger claim to the throne, and Henry VIII, of course, felt, threatened that, and he, story short, there's a story with it, but not enough time, but he had him executed.
I was going to say, I was going to say that. Yeah,
surprise, surprise. And of course, the king, Henry VIII in this case, took over the place, and he had Pence's Place as his hunting lodge. And that's the irony, because a hunting lodge, wow, this is a big hunting lodge. And it's got a 14th, going back in time, it's got a 14th century medieval hall as well. But, more grand than in Ightham Moat, but still very historic. So it basically gives a comparison between the two sites. That's a private foundation that manages Pence's Place. So with this medieval listing, there's no must-haves. These are as per the listing. But then I offer options as well, okay? Would you like me to mention a couple of other places?
Yeah, because I have to say, just Canterbury came to mind for me.
Yes.
Mainly because I'm still traumatized from doing the Chaucer's Canterbury Tales when I was at university, which actually made me give up English after the first year. But Canterbury is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful city. So I'm guessing Canterbury might come up.
Yes, it's a mix and match. Now, generally as a rule of thumb, I try not to go with my guests to more than 2 destinations in a day, because these, of course, are private tours, and the last thing anybody wants is to be rushed.
Yeah.
And because, as mentioned in our previous podcast, Tracy, the gardens, they're beautiful, and you don't want to rush through these things and miss these wonderful gardens, particularly in the spring and summer months. Yeah. So yes, absolutely. I mean, there's no must-haves. I mean, through my tailor-made proposition, which the listing, does mention, there are other options like Canterbury. Of course, that is, the big pull there is the famous cathedral. Now, just a caveat, I don't guide in the cathedral because it's a place of worship. Okay. So when my guests basically want to visit the cathedral, they will do that themselves, or, have an audio tour, or if there's availability, they join a group tour if they want to. Okay. But I do offer an outdoor guiding tour of Canterbury itself. Okay. And it's usually mixed with somewhere else. So yes, absolutely. I don't want to confuse anybody here. There are different combinations. Okay. It's very possible to do Ightham Moat in the morning. And, if my guests prefer to go to Canterbury in the afternoon, yes, absolutely, we can, and we don't do Pence's Place. So what I'm saying really is that to do Ightham Moat, Pence's Place and Canterbury in a day is a push.
It's too much.
So it's just too much.
And then I'm gonna throw Hever in there as well.
Hever Castle.
So Hever Castle.
Yes. So absolutely, I've had guests who have mixed up Ightham Moat. We do a combination of Ightham Moat with Hever Castle, because some of these places, not Canterbury, but places like Ightham Moat, Pence's Place, Hever Castle, they're within what we call the Weald of Kent, the Weald. So that used to be a heavily forested area where the medieval kings used to go hunting.
Yeah.
And there's also Knoll, in the area, which I'll come back to in a minute. But Hever Castle absolutely is in the mix. And of course, that big pull there, as many of your listeners will know, is Anne Boleyn. That was Anne Boleyn's former family home. So that can be done separately. There's a separate listing for that, for Hever Castle. But of course, if my guests have a bit of time during the day, we can, add a bit of medieval like Ightham Moat, or even Pence's Place first, and we do Hever Castle or vice versa. Again, I don't want to confuse anyone. There's lots of different combinations.
Yeah.
Just very quickly, I did say I'll come back to that. Knowles in the Weald as well. And that's very medieval. That's where the archbishops and bishops used to meet. Very palatial. And then ultimately it went to the Sackville family during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. So lots of history from medieval, inevitably into the Tudor era as well.
Well, no, absolutely. So there's lots to choose from, isn't there? So you can, obviously you've got your medieval data. We know you've got a Tudor data as well, but you can mix it up. So if for example, if it was myself and Doug, so this is a really good example because he has an absolute real love for medieval history. And I really, just like the Tudors.
Yes.
So we could mix it up, couldn't we?
Absolutely. We're practical.
Yeah.
Because of course, look, compared to the US, Canada, Australia, geographically, we're a small country. But as you know, we have windy, beautiful country lanes and things. And, of course, you want to take that in at a good, nice, pace. And it's important to be realistic in terms of, for reasons already given, what we can cover. So I'll give you another example, completely different example, for example. So outside of the Weald of Kent. So the Weald of Kent is, it's sort of like west of the county of Kent. So from where I pick up my guests in Bromley, it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to get to the Weald of Kent. Okay. But for example, if my guests want Canterbury and perhaps Dover Castle, that's outside of the area that we just spoke about predominantly. And that'll be a longer journey to Canterbury. And of course, Canterbury can be a very busy place, so we need to factor that in. Okay. Yeah. So yes, I've delivered a number of tours to Canterbury. And after we visit Canterbury, we go to Dover Castle, which of course has that medieval history within the castle. And I don't want to digress too much, but it's got layers and layers and layers of history, going, through, the Great War, the First World War, and of course the Second World War. So lots of layers of history.
So, I mean, basically, John, people need to jump onto your website and have a look because you really offer such a wide variety of options. If people have got an interest in Churchill, if people have got an interest in Anne Boleyn, if people have got an interest in more in the Tudors, if people have got an interest in medieval, if they've got interest in all the castles, you basically cover such a lot of different places. And as you say, places that I'm English. I hadn't heard of Iron Moat or Penshurst Place. So I'm kind of fascinated to go and find out more about these places now. Just to increase my own knowledge as well about what it was like to live in medieval England. I know a certain amount, but how fascinating and the opportunity to do that. But also, I just want to kind of say, John, because you touched on a couple of things as we've been talking that I just want to actually kind of really kind of stress. And we wrote between ourselves. I know you were involved and Victoria's involved and has helped to put together. I did an article about the benefits of having a private driver tour guide. And you've kind of touched on a couple of those. The fact that you have, the local knowledge, you drive, you get driven to these places so you can sit back, you can enjoy it. You're not rushed as you would be on a group tour. You have those contacts and the knowledge, you know the people at the different places. So, you can introduce people to them. I'm now just going to throw this in there. I'm going to read some of the quotes from your website, from reviews from some of your guests. And so I just think it's really, it just really adds another depth to it to actually hear what some of your guests have said. So obviously people who are listening to the podcast can't see, but John's gone, he's actually blushing. So I'm just going to say, I have got four. I am going to do all four of them, John.
Wow, I'm going to take a deep breath here.
Well, because I think they all touch on really important points that I think is really important for our listeners to hear, really. And the first one, basically, and again, they all bring up these same points. As a local, John understands exactly where to go and how best to get around. It took the guesswork out of it for us. John was gracious and easy to talk with and has relationships with those who work at these historic properties. We felt taken care of from start to finish. I always tell friends that private tours are the best way to spend your time and money when traveling abroad. And that was definitely proved true with John. So that's lovely. So, again, it's reinforcing the benefits of going with you guys. And obviously, we have you and we have quite a few private driver tour guides across the country that have been on the podcast. And, it's fantastic. So how did you feel about that review? I bet that made you feel very happy when that came
Yeah,
in.
it's rewarding to get them. I mean, of course, why wouldn't I love getting reviews like that? And they're hard earned, because my mantra really is treat others the way you want to be treated, and everybody's got different expectations, and it's important to, sometimes particularly if they want a tailor-made tour, like, some of mine are not just for the day, they're, 2 or maybe even 3 days, so I don't do multi-day tours, I don't organize accommodation and things like, because I'm not a travel agent. What I concentrate are the actual tours, but where people got more time, sometimes they spend more than a day. And it could be a bit of a mix and match between medieval and other eras as well. But you go ahead. I mean, the reviews obviously are very, very rewarding. Puts a spring in my step.
They're really important. And also I think they talk about your versatility as well and your ability, because obviously when you're a tour guide, you have to be able to get on with people. And this next quote I really like, because it also shows, you're dealing with multi-generational families, friends, couples, whatever. But this one was really lovely. John provided an outstanding tour for our family, my wife and 3 children, ages ranging from 7 to 11, and myself. I cannot recommend John highly enough. He was attentive to the needs of a family, regularly pointing out spots to get snacks or to use the toilets, patient with lagging children, helping with lots of family photos, and our children absolutely adored him. So, when we talk about history and these history tours, I can imagine sometimes people with kids may think, oh, how is this going to work if I'm taking children on a tour with John? And then you read that. So obviously, can you remember that tour?
Yes, I do. That was a lovely family from Canada. And we visited Canterbury first that day. And then on the way back, Auckland, we visited historic Knoll, the one I mentioned earlier.
Yes.
For that one, there was a bit for everybody because the kids were still fairly young. And and a couple of them were a bit jet lagged. So thankfully that, a couple of them managed to have a quick nap in my car on the way to Canterbury. So with that one, of course, I mean, look, I'm a family man myself. My kids are slightly older now, the young adults. But having traveled, we're a family of 5, got 3 kids. I guess you have that experience. And everybody is different, but one thing that I will definitely consider and make sure is that the children are engaged as well. So very quick example, when we got to Knoll, there's not a play area as such, but it's a very good interactive area where there's a bit of technology, where the kids will be hands-on and can interact with that technology. So while the parents are speaking to some of the staff. So again, it's bringing those things in. There's nothing deep in terms of a big history lesson because at the end of the day, they're on vacation. Why would I do that to them? And it's fun, and Noel's got a deer park. So why wouldn't we see some of the deer? Yeah, we're not stuck in the house just looking at artifacts. We go and see the deer, So it's bringing those sort of things to life.
That's perfect. So so it's lovely to know. Obviously, if people have got families and are interested in going on a tour with you, that you can cater for families as well. It doesn't matter kind of the kids obviously were quite young, saying 7, with the eldest one was 11. Another quote we had was actually about the medieval. Somebody did the medieval and Tudor English private data. I guess so. Obviously, you did the mix. So we talked about. Went to Item Moat. I'm always think I'm going to say that wrong. And Hever Castle. And that you said that you were very knowledgeable and very kind, and the private tour was all they expected and lots more, which is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, again, very rewarding. And, of course, that one, had a degree of qualification in there.
Yeah.
And because they wanted a bit of both. And of course, medieval leads into Tudor. I mean, just for nothing deep here, but just to give listeners a bit of knowledge on the era we're talking about predominantly. Speaking, when we say medieval England, we're talking about 11th century to the 15th century. So it's something like 1066 to 1485. And those who are sort of Tudor lovers particularly will know the significance of 1485, the Battle of Bosworth Field, where King Richard III was defeated by the then-to-be King Henry VII. That was King Henry VIII's father. But this is where I can go into all sorts of rabbit holes and talk for England literally. And so that would be sort of like very loosely the medieval period. Now, obviously, there are different parts of that, like the Middle Ages, etc. And then beyond that, really, from sort of 1486 inclusive, it's like the Tudor era, where we go into, of course, where I mentioned King Henry VII, and then obviously King Henry VIII, and then his various daughters, and then of course the Boleyns come up, etc. So absolutely, there's one leads to the other, and inevitably there's a bit of a mix in there, and that some guests want.
So for me, I mean, what I would find really interesting, I have to say, is doing the medieval data and then going on to day 2 and doing the Tudor. That's a great way. I think that would be a really in depth if you really want to kind of get a good feel for what it was like in those times, and then that's a great way to do it.
And bringing in the kids. I mean, just talking about families, and it's not just about small kids, of course, etc. What I found through my guests is that sense of freedom as well, Tracy. So of course, London's great, and like I mentioned, Tower of London, Hampton Court Palace, etc. I don't cover the Tower of London. Nothing wrong with it. I just don't cover that. My focus predominantly is Southeast England. Okay, so that's and Sussex. Of course, I've got a couple of other tours. I guide at Hampton Court Palace, which is southwest of London. But what we're talking about here when we talk about medieval England is predominantly Southeast England in Kent and Sussex. And there's a lot on offer. But the point I was trying to make is that I've had families who are really impressed by the way these destinations like castles offer a lot of freedom where they can explore. So I'll give you an example. There's one of your members of UK Travel Planning, Amy and her family, and last year in the summer, who they booked Dover Castle with me with the White Cliffs, and we had glorious weather, etc. And 2 teenage children, and they're already down the rounds, etc. And I got the feeling that you didn't have to say it. It's like the kids, being teenagers, saying, "Oh, not another tour," sort of thing, But they were enlightened the fact that in Dover Castle, there's a lot of freedom to explore tunnels and passages, up, medieval steps, etc. Whether it was good enough to even go on the roof, to have a look at this fantastic view of Dover and, and the coast. And of course, in terms of the English Channel. So they actually expressed how different it was compared to some of the major sites in London where, and we talked about it, and they weren't the first ones to have told me that. It has a less of an attraction feel. It's somewhere they can really experience and enjoy the freedom of the day. Hope that makes sense.
That's a really good point. That really is a good point about that as well. And, I obviously, I love visiting all the main destinations in London. I think I've gone to the Tower of London about 4 times. And it's great. And I think they have got really good at because, as I said, I used to be a history teacher. I was a history teacher, and sometimes I want to sit and cry when I think about how boring it used to be. Yes. I think everything is so much more improved, much more interactive, much more hands-on, much more. Even I think about going to Stonehenge. I think the little museum, the visitor centre at Stonehenge is fantastic. It's been done really, really well. It's a really interesting, visitor centre museum where you can learn about Stonehenge. And I think that's important. Rather than feeling that, you're going to be taking your kids to somewhere that they're going to find it boring or it's just going to be too much, but actually that there is some, it's going to be interesting for them as well. I'm just going to jump in, John, because I'm kind of conscious of time, but I just want to read the fourth. I did say I was going to do 4, so I'm going to do 4. So the next one, we had a very enjoyable and interesting day at Hiva with John. He did all he could to make our visit comfortable and convenient. We particularly enjoyed the introduction and interaction with the staff at the castle. You see, now I think that is amazing, John. That would make a huge difference to me, because I'm sure listeners don't get this, but I actually quite like talking, and I do quite like talking to people. So for me, being able to talk to the staff, and you know what? Because you always have questions that come up when you're wandering around these places.
Of course.
So, you want to ask, don't you? And you think, oh, this might sound silly, but I want to ask this question. So the fact, and they said, John's relationships and local knowledge definitely made him worth seeking out. We enjoyed his company and will definitely tour with John in the future. And and that's really the best reference and you can get is somebody saying, we've been out on a tour with you, but we're going to come back and do it again.
Yeah, and that's super rewarding when that happens, and it's happened. And of course, COVID sort of like delayed everything. But particularly last year, I met some guests again, who I'd met before the pandemic, and they're able to come back, and they become good friends. I've got a set of guests who are coming back this summer, and where I delivered a 2-day tour for them. Some, Tudor, and some, of course, back in time, medieval. And they're booking a 4-day tour with me, going more in depth, this summer. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's very tailor-made, that, and bespoke.
And that's brilliant. And, that's what you can do. So as I say, I'm kind of slightly conscious of the time, because I think we've covered quite a lot, though. And I just want to ask you as well, really, because I know people listening will be kind of going, oh, this sounds really great. I want to get in contact with John. I want to chat to him about, making a tour that will fit my family, or me and my husband, me and my partner, whatever. So can you just talk us through how they can do that, John?
Sure. Again, I've touched on this. Everybody's got different expectations and requirements, etc. And again, putting in perspective, we're predominantly talking about Kent and Sussex here, okay, parts of Sussex. So what I would say to guests is have a look around my website. That's johnenglandtours.com. Please tell me that, you've listened to this podcast, so I know that, you're part of the UK travel planning, community. That's important.
Yep.
And so have a look around. There's some blogs on there that will help with ideas on my website. So have a read of those. There's the tailor-made page, where I share some ideas as well, in terms of some of the more popular tours, in terms of the tailor-made offering. And it could give you some ideas, but of course there's the contact form. Fill that out. If you've got any questions, let me know, and we can take it from there. And I can personalize it as best as I can. But, just as a reminder, these are private tours. Yeah, I know we all want to see all these places and cram it in, etc. But as a rule of thumb, really, it's really 2 destinations in a day. Of course, we can break for lunch or tea, particularly in the summer months. Yeah. But so we don't rush around.
Yeah, no, that's great. And obviously I'll put links to your website in the show notes as well. I am just going to tell everybody that I'm going to be going out with John to Hiva Castle. We haven't kind of decided where the second destination is.
Well, it could be a surprise, Tracy. You never know. But I think we've mentioned one of those places in this podcast. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be really exciting.
Yeah, so it'll be a good day.
And I'm hoping to do a podcast after being in the UK for sort of 2 or 3 weeks. So I'm sure I'll be talking about that tour. So I'm really excited about that. But I just want to say thank you so much, John, for coming on again and talking about your tours and just getting to know. So our listeners get to know you. Obviously, people on our Facebook group know you pretty well as well, and listen to the other podcasts and contact John if you've got any questions, you want to book anything, get in touch. Just please do mention us.
Yes, please do. It's been a pleasure, Tracy. It's always good to speak with you, and I look forward to hearing, from some of your members to help them too.
That's brilliant. So I just want to kind of finish off the podcast by just saying to everybody, so if you want to find out John's details and anywhere we talked about in today's episode, including how you spell I am moat, because I will get it right. You can find that in the show notes, which for this episode, which will be on uktravelplanning.com/episode 41. Like I say, you can also listen to John in previous episode 6 and episode 18, I think it was.
I think you said 19, did you?
19. Oh, honestly, my age. Oh, I keep forgetting things, honestly.
If I heard that right.
It's a good job you remembered. So that's right, episode 19. So episode 6 and episode 19, you can hear from John again. But again, I'll put that in the podcast show notes. But basically, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody for listening. We really appreciate how much people are tuning in every week to listen to the podcast. And we're getting some fantastic reviews in. And while I'm not going to do it this week, I will again be reading out reviews. So do please pop onto your wherever you listen to your podcast and leave us a review. We absolutely love it. And I love giving shout outs to people on the podcast. So, leave us a review, and you never know, you could hear your name on the podcast. But that's all I want to say for this week. And for everybody out there, and for myself, because I'll be going to the UK very soon, happy UK travel planning.